Welcome to some more game analysis, and in this video I'm going to look at an interesting game I had in the 4NCL, which is a team competition in Britain, and this win got me to 7 out of 7, which I was pretty happy with. Now before I show you the game, let me just set the scene. I thought I'd record this in the Surrey countryside, and as you can see the sun is rising behind me, so don't be surprised if it gets brighter during the course of the video. And the 4NCL is the biggest team competition in England, and there's some extremely strong teams playing. Now I play for Team Cheddleton, and my captain is Fiona, so it's a really good team. Let me just show you a photo taken only 2 days ago, and you can see how good our team spirit is there. And just going from left to right very quickly, we have Vlad, my friend Blair Connell, who was a substitute for this weekend, first time he's played in 10 years. Fiona, of course, and there's me giving Keith a little rub on the head. Keith Arkall, Tamas, and then Isra Kirk and David Howe at the end. So that's our team, very friendly and nice team. And we've had 8 rounds, there's 3 more to go. We're in a position to win the league, but let's just have a look at the score tables at the moment. And this is the cross tables for what we call the championship pool. We can see we're second, but we've got the same amount of points as the, should we say, the baddies. Guildford won, even though I was born in Guildford and live near Guildford, so I can't be too evil towards them. But Guildford have an incredibly strong team. They normally spend a lot of money on getting top players, so we are the underdogs. And with 3 rounds to go, we have to play them in the last round. So wish us the best of luck. Going to be a very interesting match. We will be outrated, but we have a chance. So these were the pairings for round 7, Saturday. And as you can see, I was faced against David Guthrie. Of course, this is a game I should win on paper because I outrate my opponent by a number of points. But it was a very interesting game, and we'll go through my thought process after that. Now, I only drew in round 8, and here are the pairings for round 8. But I have to say my opponent, Kayla Feuser, played very, very good defensive game. I think her mum passed away recently, so all condolences to her. And, she defended incredibly well in a bad position where she was a pawn down. So and she did play nearly, if I looked at the game afterwards, on chess bomb, and all her moves, she didn't make any mistakes according to chess bomb. So it was a very accurate game. Anyway, move on to this one. So I had the white pieces, and I thought today I'd try something a little bit different. I had a particular setup in mind, and this is something that you guys at home may really be interested in opening wise. It's quite a secret opening, this one, no joking. And it really has shares in spirit. It's something you do against the Sicilian. So I started with e4 today, thought I'd have a bit of a change. My opponent played c5, and in this position, of course, there's a number of lines. But the opening I played here is really aimed at getting a good classical Dutch position or a decent, good Grand Prix attack position. Now, obviously, the open Sicilian is where you go knight to f3 and you go d4. There's a lot of theory in this, so I tend to avoid keeping up with all the latest theory in these lines. I've played knight c3 on numerous occasions, and the idea of this is generally to go f4. So one of the main lines being knight to c6, and now f4, g6, knight to f3, and this kind of thing, bishop g7. Now, the only downside of this particular variation is sometimes you don't want a knight on c3, because you can see here black has a very good grip on the d4 square. He has 3 pieces controlling that square, and often a piece will jump in there later on. And the system I played here is aimed to get this kind of structure, but with the possibility of going pawn c3, which I think is very advantageous on the Grand Prix. And it's a really crafty move order. To explain other things why this doesn't, or why you can't get the setup I want to with other move orders. If you try going f4 here, which is another attempt to get the same setup, Black has a very good move. Black can play d5, and I actually had this a couple of rounds ago. And this takes advantage of the fact that white's pawn on e4 is a bit unsecure. And if white takes on d5, knight to f6 is pretty much the refutation of this line. You could take back on f4 on d5, and the pawn on f4 doesn't want to be on f4. This pawn does not want to be on f4. It actually weakens black's position. If white ever goes c4, black plays e6 and gets tremendous compensation for the sacrificed pawn. Pawn takes, bishop takes, two pieces developed, massive hole on d4, weak pawn on f4. I really like black's position here. So the next move, I would suggest that you guys might want to try out. And another thing it's trying to get is good classical Dutch. So before I show you my plan, I want to give the backing to tell you where the concept came from. And let's just quickly switch the board around and again show you what I mean by getting a good classical Dutch. So let's say in g3, f5, bishop g2, knight f6, knight to f3. Now, in the classical Dutch, one of the main moves you want to play is e5. But often you play e6 first, and then let's say castles, bishop e7. And now if white doesn't go d4, but let's say plays something like d3 or c4, you often, let's say castles, this is main Dutch theory, knight c3, you want to go e5. So you have to go d6. And again, if they don't go d4, if they go d3, you now play e5. So all the things I'm telling you will fit into the strategy in a second. And it shows you why having good concepts is more important than other things in chess. And remember this setup. Now this is what I want to get with the white pieces. But here it's white to move. And in the game that I had, what I'm going to show you in a second, I'm a couple of tempos down because I've lost a move going e6, e5, and I'm black. So after e4, I'll switch the board back around now because I'm white in this game, remember, c5, I came up with this very interesting idea which I've discussed with some other English players before. And that is bishop to e2. And it's bizarre that this quiet and weird looking move that really shouldn't be a threat to black gives me exactly the kind of position I want. So if you've brought my Dutch DVD and you're wondering about what to do against a Sicilian, this would be a perfect opening for you. There's also little or no theory on this, so you don't have to know anything except for the setup. What's the idea behind this move? Well, first of all, if black plays d5 now, I've improved my position because I haven't got a pawn on f4, I've got a piece developed, so I can take on d5. If my opponent plays a move like knight to f6, well, this is a much better structure because compared to the other lines, my pawn is not on f4, I think it's weak on f4, I have a piece developed. So there are a number of ideas you can do here. I probably wouldn't go c4, I'd probably just develop. And if he goes queen takes d5, well, you have the interesting sacrifice knight c3, bishop, queen takes here, bishop f3, with knight coming into one of these two squares. That's interesting. But a very safe line, which gives white a very nice position, is bishop f3. And this is just a bit better for white. So it stops d5, in my opinion. I don't think d5 is a good move. And if black plays normal moves, which my opponent did, knight c6, this is what he played, I now go d3, and I'm going for f4, knight to f3. I'm trying to get my ideal setup with a couple of extra tempo. My ideal setup on the Grand Prix, a classical Dutch, a couple of tempo up with e5, e4 being played. So it's a very crafty idea. And again, if black plays d5, you have two options. You can take again, which I think is good, take on d5. You can even play f4 in these types of positions. Because the ending after taking on e4, and now when the queens come off, because I have a bishop on e2, I'm able to go bishop takes d1. And I always think white's slightly better in these positions. These two pawns are very pleasant. And I have the strong plan. This is a key idea worth remembering in the Dutch in this opening. A key idea to do your bishop on d1, because this looks like a bad piece, is to go c3 and then bring that bishop out to b3 or to a4. Key concept, this one. So well, let's get back to the game and see how my opponent dealt with these ideas. He continued very naturally, and I think most players will do this. g6, So playing as if I'm doing a Grand Prix, but I have not committed a piece to c3. Remember in the first line I showed you, there's a knight on c3. And I don't want this position because I want to be able to go pawn to c3. And so after this move g6, I just continue trying to get, excuse me, let me just get the position back there, guys. I continue with f4. I'm trying to get my structure. Bishop g7, knight to f3. And look what I've got. I've got my Dutch structure now. Perfect. It's gone perfect. My opponent now develops knight to f6. And I simply castle kingside. Now here, I think maybe my opponent should have gone d5 here, because this asks the question to my centre straight away. Now I can go e5, and this is okay, because after knight d7, I haven't gone knight to c3, and another advantage of not putting a knight here is that I can play c3, and I can go d4. And this allows me to get a very nice pawn change. So actually here, I still think white's got a very nice position. But I still think, well, I don't know, the way my opponent played it's not worse for him, but I was very happy to see it. Castles kingside, and, well, hello. Castles, why aren't you castling? Try castling. That's weird, isn't it? Look at that, it's frozen. Frozen in the midst of my commentary. So let's just go back, and I think it's a slight... Okay, so I castle, and now... It doesn't want to castle. It doesn't like that move. Let's see if I can just refresh. Sometimes it occasionally does these things. I don't want to lose the game, but come on, back we come. So castling, and now you castle. There we go. Back to the castling. Okay, and now if you've got my Dutch DVD, if you've looked at Dwayne Jones's Grand Prix DVD, you'll know what the correct plan is. And again, now we see a very thematic attacking plan. Queen to e1. This is a key idea, and this is one reason I don't play these positions with g3 and bishop g2, which you can do. You can try to go for the same bishop with a pawn, kind of a position with a pawn on g3, but I don't do that. I prefer having a bishop on e2, because I want my queen to come over to h4, when the normal way to checkmate your opponent is going f5, bishop h6, knight g5, and eventually queen takes h7 checkmate. Now that may seem very complicated, but it's amazing how many times this plan actually comes together. And this queen e1 is a key idea. You have to remember this idea of swinging it over here. So my opponent continued normally. He played d6, and now my queen comes to this aggressive square, and I'm ready here to go f5. Now when I played this move, I was assuming my opponent would play e6 to try to stop me going f5, because it's very dangerous if he lets me play this, but I think I can play f5 anyway, and I was planning to sack a pawn here. And the point is, if my opponent takes on f5, bishop g5 gives me a very nasty pin on the knight on f6, and here I might even now decide to move my knight to c3 because it can come into d5, and this looked very dangerous. I didn't really see how my opponent was going to get out of this pin. I like my position here, so already I'm a really big fan of my position. My opponent played a decent idea. He went bishop g4. Now normally this is a great idea because my knight on f3 is a key attacking piece. This knight wants to come to g5 later on and try to deliver checkmate. So swapping off this knight on f3 is a very good idea generally. But it works much better, again, when I have my knight on c3, as we're going to see. It does not work so well now that I've left my knight on b1. And again, my subtle opening has made this possible, because I can go knight to d2, and I still keep a knight around the king side, and we'll see how dangerous this knight becomes. My opponent now took on f3 anyway, so I played knight takes, and now he went knight d4. Now, I don't think taking on d4 is terrible for me, but I didn't want to give him this play on the c-file. I mean, a key idea in these types of positions is bishop to d1. This stops him ever taking on c2, and then I can try to attack on the king side. But I didn't see the point of allowing the opening of the c-file. In this particular case, I actually think his double pawns give him some advantage because he opens the C file, he has good central control. So sometimes, you know, you have to play against the rules, and here, doubling the pawns, I think helps my opponent. So after knight d4, I played another thematic idea taken from the Dutch defence. Bishop d1, simply defending my pawn here, and now I think he should take on f3. I think he should take this one, but here we can see I get the same position, but he hasn't got the pressure on the c file. Now I have two interesting options. The move I wanted to play was rook takes f3, the rook swinger, because this rook wants to come to h3, and eventually, again, I want to try to checkmate on h7. I have to get rid of the defender on f6. So this is the aggressive idea. But I thought here, black could gain counterplay with the move c4. You've always got to watch out for your opponent's ways to create counterplay. And in this game, what I'm doing, it's a bit like the last analysis video I'm doing. I'm trying to improve my position but restrict my opponent. And it's a technique called improve and restrict. I don't want to allow moves like c4 because all of a sudden he gets some counterplay here. And the idea is to undermine my pawn structure. If I, therefore, had played bishop takes f3, I restrict his options. Because if he goes c4 now, well, I'm defending e4, so I can simply take that pawn. So I restrict his options. So I think I would have just played bishop takes f3, and I think I got a small advantage here. My pawns are better advanced. My bishop might come into the game later on. I like my position. But my opponent didn't do this. I think he should. And what he did here, instead of playing this capture, he played e6, which is a normal-looking move. But now, again, we see an advantage I have from not playing the Grand Prix and not committing a knight to c3. I came up with a very good idea now. I wanted to keep pieces on the board. My opponent's more cramped, so I avoid exchanging knights. Knight g5. This also really forces my opponent's next move. My opponent can't allow my knight to sit there because clearly I might even have ideas of e5 and checkmate on h7. He has to play h6, and now my knight comes back to h3. Why has this helped me? 2 reasons. 3 reasons even. h6 is a weakness. I've got ideas now of going f5 and bishop takes h6. So I've provoked him to make a pawn move around his king. This is a very good technique. You shouldn't make pawn moves around your king in a lot of positions because it weakens your king. That is the case for black here. I've also allowed myself the option of going c3, kicking this knight away. Remember, this is the whole point of this opening, one of the points. And this will kick this strong knight away. I gain control of the d4 square. And thirdly, my knight actually now, which was on f3, it allows my rook to control the main break. And let's just see how the game develops. It went king h7. Oh, no, it didn't go king h7. That's a terrible move. Sorry, I'm doing this, trying to remember the moves here. Okay, sorry. It went knight d7. My opponent desperately trying to swap queens. But of course, swapping queens would be a massive mistake for me here because I'm the side trying to attack my opponent's king. I'm clearly trying to attack him because the main move is f5 and to a checkmate. By swapping queens, I get rid of all my attacking options. So it would be a horrible error to do that. Instead, queen g3, keeping the queens on the board. And also, my opponent would love to play f5 in these kind of structures. This is known to be a great defensive move. But he can't play this now because I take on g6. So I'm stopping this idea. So he played king h7 now, trying to play f5. But now I put my plan into motion. c3, not c4, that'd be a horrible mistake. c3, kicking this knight away. And after c3, well, his knight has to go back to c6. And now, just in time, because if my opponent plays f5, he stops my attack. So we have to play f5 now. And you can see here, I'm attacking. My opponent put his knight on e5. And now I had a very long think. I missed a good opportunity here. Well, I say I missed. I saw it, but I thought my opponent doesn't have many moves. And again, what I'm thinking here, rather than rushing my attack, I'm doing quite a subtle thing. I realise my opponent doesn't have many moves, and a lot of his moves weaken his position. So again, I'm doing this strict and improve. I improve a piece and I give my opponent the opportunity to hang himself. Now, the move I wanted to play, but I must admit I missed something, was bishop g5. And I was nearly going to play this instantaneously. And this is very tricky and probably the best move. Because I want to play f6, and I suddenly got a bit worried about my opponent taking here. But it becomes clear that after queen h4, my opponent is in a bad position. He only has one move here. He has to try to run. He has to try rook to this square. But now I had calculated check, king f7. I had calculated up to this point, but I couldn't see a breakthrough. Now, maybe you can improve. Can you see the winning idea here for white? I'm not even going to tell you the winning idea. You can improve on my analysis here. There is a winning idea that would basically just win this position. So this was the one chance I missed in the game. I think the move I played is still okay, but bishop g5 was a better move. I mean, in the game, I just improved, restrict and improve. Bishop c2. And the reason this is improving is because my bishop, even though there's a number of pawns in the way, it gives that bishop better potential for the future. At some point, I might open it up towards my opponent's king. So I'm just improving. And I realised I can do this because I saw that my opponent doesn't have any good plans. And indeed, he hung himself here. He should try to keep the pawn protection around his king, but he played dubiously now by taking on f5. And already you can see this helps my bishop because pawns are getting out of the way. And now he took on f5 again. And this is a horrible judgment from my opponent because he needed this pawn on g6. It's clear. And now the position should be lost for him. Still have to be careful. You still have to win it. My opponent played knight g6. This is his idea, to put his knights around his king to defend with his knights. But I think this has just helped me. Now, there's a couple of options here. My first thought was to sack a pawn and release my bishop. So my first thought was to go d4. And one idea is after pawn takes d4, go rook takes f7. But I wasn't sure about this. I wasn't sure. My opponent had a move like knight to e5. And one thing I think I did very well here is I have a good advantage. Clearly, my opponent's king is very weak. You should look for immediate wins like d4. But if they're unclear, if you can't see that they are immediately winning, you should not play them. Because if you have a good position anyway, why take the risk? It's much more important in these attacking positions to just build up. Because it's more likely when your opponent's under pressure that he will blunder without you doing anything immediately than you winning by doing something crazy. Don't do something crazy, which I do quite often. So instead, I simply played rook to h5, and this creates good threats against h6. Now, my opponent played knight to e7, trying to bring his piece over to defend. And now I just wanted to get my last two pieces in the game. I'm attacking with everything. I can't see an immediate win here. So another technique I use a lot is bring in the reinforcements, crash bang wallop. If you can't see a crash bang wallop way to win, and I was looking obviously at moves like bishop takes h6, knight to g5 check, but I calculated they don't work, bring in the reinforcements. So these guys here, the ones that are highlighted, are the only two pieces not playing a part, so let's bring them in. Bishop to f4. Now, I'm quite happy if my opponent takes on f4, because I have a couple of moves here, but whatever I play, I'm now going to get d4 in. I've got rid of one of the defenders of his king, which must help me. So I'm also threatening to take that pawn, so my opponent moved that pawn, and now I play rook to f1, and my last piece comes into the attack. Now, my opponent made a mistake here, but it's a very uncomfortable position. Rook to c8. And you may have seen my tweet here, but I had quite a long think now. And because I bring in my reinforcements, let's go back to one of my rules. And it is crash bang wallop. If not, bring in reinforcements. But here, I do have a crash bang wallop way to break through. Now, try to think of all the forcing moves here. I have a way to get a winning attack. It's quite a little bit tricky. I suggest that if you want to try to find that way, you pause the video now and try to find my crash bang wallop way through here. So how can I win here with violence? Pause the video now if you need to. Well, you should always look for checks and captures when you've built up your position to the ultimate attacking position you can. And look, every single piece is attacking. Don't be fooled by my bishop on c2. This is a great attacking unit. I might have d4, or quite importantly, I have bishop d1 in some variations. But every other piece is attacking, so there must surely be a win here. And yes, there is. I open up the king with bishop takes h6. Now, if you saw this move, congratulations. If you didn't, have a think now, and again, try to work out how I'm going to force the position to be a winning position favourable to myself. So pause the video now. Again, if you try to help your calculation here, what would you do here? Well, my opponent clearly has to take on h6, otherwise he's going to have open king and a pawn down. And now I throw in my knight with check. So I bring this one into the game. My opponent has to defend his bishop. Otherwise, I'm going to take it with a winning position. And now, again, if you haven't seen the win quite yet, pause the video now and try to work out white to play and win here. And through crash bang wallops, I get a winning position. So again, I had to calculate this, and what I did, I basically, because my pieces are so well positioned, it was obvious I had a tactic, but then I had to double check my calculations just to make sure. Don't rush into it. Don't get excited. Double check your calculations. And here I can play rook takes h6, forcing the opening of the position. Now my opponent can't allow me to go rook h7 check or something like queen to h3. He has to take the rook. He can't refuse the sacrifice. And now, what is the next move? Pause again. Well, originally when I saw this combination, so before I went into this sacrifice, I wanted to play queen to h3 check. But I realised here my opponent has a defence. He can't go king g7 because that's checkmate, quite a theematic move. Remember we said about bringing one of the points to bring the queen to h4 is to try to throw the queen into h7 with checkmate, and this is a grand example of that. So he has to come out into the open. And of course, I wanted to win the game like this because it's beautiful when you can get a king hunt to work. And originally, I thought that queen to this square would be checkmating my opponent because he can't retreat. And I assumed he'd have to move his king forwards or sideways. And after king h5, we now see why this bishop is great. Bishop d1 check, king here, and queen h6 is a beautiful checkmate. So, of course, I'd love to finish a game like this. But I realised in this position, my opponent has a quite fantastic defence. Knight to f4. And unbelievably, I could not see a win here. For example, queen takes f4 check, king g6. And the important defensive move my opponent has is knight g6. I just couldn't see a win. I mean, if I go d4 check, he goes king back. If I go queen here check, he goes king here. And I have to be careful because rook f3 may look like it's winning because I'm threatening rook h3 check and rook h8. But I could lose this game because knight g6 and he defends h8. And he's also threatening the exchange of queens. So this is one way where lack of calculation could let you down and you could lose the game. Also, had I rushed into playing this thinking, oh, I'm going to get a beautiful win, again, I may have messed things up. Now, the one other line I was trying to calculate deeply here, after knight to f4, I thought a very beautiful idea was rook takes f4. And I suddenly thought, well, this could be winning. Because if he tries to defend with knight g6, well, now rook takes f7 check, and his king can't retreat anymore. And this is winning. And I couldn't find a win after f5. I still thought here this position could be very interesting. But I couldn't see a win. I was looking at queen e6, trying to stop his king from retreating. But his important defensive idea is king to f6. I nearly have rook to g4. Beautiful move here. I was calculating this as well. The point is, if king takes, bishop d1 check, and now we have a number of ways to checkmate, but I like queen h6, checkmate in one. And again, two rooks down, but checkmate. But unfortunately, his king, of course, runs home, and he may be defending. But this is so unclear. And again, like I said earlier, if you have a choice between an unclear variation where you're not sure who's doing well, and your position is good anyway, then of course try to find something cleaner and more simple. And of course here I had calculated that I didn't have to play this check, but I had another way to win. Can you see my other way to win here? Have a little think about it if you need to. But my other way to win was rook takes f7 first. And of course I'd seen this in advance. The point is I'm threatening rook to h7 checkmate. And now we'll see why this is different to the last variation. If he takes my rook, I'm going to win his queen. And it's clear to see here I'm winning the game. I have far too much material. I can also play d4, bringing my last piece into the game. It's completely lost for him. Game over. I mean, he can resign here, simply. And the only other way my opponent can stop me playing rook to h7 checkmate, how? Is by playing rook to h8. This is the only other way. If he tries to make an escape square on g6, let's say he moves his knight somewhere, well, knight to h8. Oh, God, it's a disgusting position. Oh, God, is it you doing it again? Knight to h8. Don't do this again. We might have to do a bit of knight to h8. It doesn't. The computer doesn't like. I hope it's not my computer. I'll just refresh the page. Misbehaving again. Bloody computers. Now, if he tries, maybe this is just such a complicated game. My computer's brain has exploded. But knight to h8, that's better. Allows checkmate because now we see the power of this bishop. And, well, his knight also gives up control of h4. So queen h4 check here. And I think the nicest checkmate is to involve my last piece and go d4 check. And after knight f5, I'll go bishop takes f5, checkmate. So the only move my opponent has after rook takes f7 is rook to h8. He has to play this move in order to defend this. But now I can do the last variation. And I calculated here that I'm winning with queen h3 check. My opponent has to take on g5. And the difference now is that after queen e3 check, which I played, I'm a rook and a knight down here. It doesn't matter, I'm forcing checkmate. My opponent is busted. If he goes knight to f4, which was the defense in the last line, I've improved my position drastically because I've got a rook in his guts. And I can go queen takes check, and after king g6, queen to f6 check. He can't go backwards with his king as he did before. And after king here, beautiful checkmate. Bishop to d1, checkmate. So my opponent tried to defend here with one of the only possibilities, king to h4. Again, if he goes to a light square here, if he goes king g4, I'm just going bishop to d1. So we're going to have to refresh the page again. I think, sorry about this. This is one of those little technical glitches that seems to be going on. But if he goes, if he goes to a light square, then bishop to d1 check, and it's clear that I'm mating him next move. This queen and this bishop do a fantastic job. So my opponent tried, but it's forced mate now. He tried king to h4 instead. And here I have to be a little bit careful because it's very tempting to go g3 check. But actually, after king h3, I couldn't see a clear win here, which is bizarre. There must be a clear win somewhere. But again, if you can't calculate the checkmate in a position where there clearly should be one, don't go into it. And I have a much easier way to checkmate here. Can you see it? We can force checkmate. Again, pause if you need to. Queen to g3 check is the correct variation, because the point now is king h5. I can bring my bishop in. Bishop check, king h6. And I saw I could force checkmate through check, so I did that. In actual fact, I can checkmate quicker with queen g4 here. And there's no way he can stop either queen h5 checkmate or queen g7 checkmate. But I wanted to checkmate through checks because it's the most violent way. And I can do that now by going back to e3. And this is a nice idea because the difference between this and the last position is my bishop. He has to go knight to f4 now. And now I simply take that one. And he allowed me to checkmate him, which was very sporting of him. And I checkmated him with queen to f6 checkmate. So, of course, that was an enjoyable game. It took me to 7 out of 7 in the 4 NCL. I drew the next round, as I said. My opponent played very well, so all credit to her. I haven't lost a game in a FIDE rated event this year, which is nice. I've got 7.5 out of 8, and hopefully I can continue that in the last weekend of the 4NCL. Now, just to remind you about this opening plan, I think this game, I enjoyed it. Of course, if you're looking for an interesting line against the Sicilian, then this Bishop E2, a move that Theory neglects, you won't find this being advertised nearly anywhere, is a very interesting possibility. And it's the kind of possibility where you can get your Dutch position if you like playing the Dutch after buying my DVD. You can also get a Grand Prix position, but you avoid the Theory. So it's a very interesting kind of new idea on move 2, which is nice in this bloody world of overcomplicated chess variations. Anyway, I've been verbally diarrheaing for too long now. So thank you so much for watching. Please do like the video if you like it. If you don't like it, bugger off. And if you anyway, I'm only joking. If you don't like it, you don't like it. What can I do? You should have stopped watching, shouldn't you? And and please do subscribe to my channel. This does help me build up and do more videos. I've got some very exciting plans. It take me a while to develop, but I will try to keep my other things going at the same time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.